Hi, I'm Sam Kouvaris, and this is Worth Quoting, brought to you by Florida Community College at Jacksonville. Our guest today is Jim Brown, former football player, former movie actor, and current activist. Jim, thanks for taking the time to spend some time with us today.
Sam, thank you for coming down.
Jim, you're involved now with this Amer-I-Can program. What exactly is it? I don't think people can quite get a handle on what it is.
Well, I'll make it real simple. There's a lot of killing going on across the country by gang members and wannabe gang members, and it's too much killing going on. Our prisons are overcrowded. Recidivism is at an all-time high. We have major problems with education. And the young people that's committing these crimes have no organization to relate to. The Amer-I-Can program was designed to relate to those individuals, to teach them life management skills, to get them employed, to deal with them as surrogate fathers, to bring them, introduce them back into the mainstream of American life.
So many people these days have a family that doesn't have two parents, doesn't have two role models to look at, and you say that this is an opportunity, as you said, for surrogate parents?
Well, that's a part of it, but our curriculum, our life management skills training is invaluable. I'll put it in this way. You take the curriculum of life management skills training, which changes the thinking of an individual. You put hardcore ex-gangsters and gang leaders and ex-convicts and make them change their lives around and then let them lead these young people into this curriculum. Then they become positive surrogate fathers because not only do they lead them into the curriculum, they get the kids back into high school, they take them on trips, they become surrogate fathers because it's the holistic approach that will bring these kids really back into the mainstream of American life.
Jim, how did we get to this point? Not that you're a historian or anything, but it seems
well,
like...
maybe I am, but...
Yeah, maybe you are, that's right. It seems like our society has moved further and further in this direction. How did we get to this point?
Because we believe in capitalism, and we believe that money is God, and our success is based on how much money you can make, and in competition. Therefore, the rich got richer, the poor got poor, the middle class shrunk, and the disenfranchised basically had no other alternatives other than to make a living and survive other than drugs, gangs, robbery, and all of these things. Therefore, you make your prisons not a deterrent, but you make it something that is almost an alternative, because 2 out of the 3 basic human needs you can get in prison: food, shelter, and clothing, and social interaction. So we have to really start looking at ourselves and the way that we set our examples for our kids, because money is not everything. Quality of life has to be emphasized. We have to go back to family values. We have to go back to things that we have gotten away from, because what you find in the street is that kids develop other families. Mm-hmm. They become gangs, not because they want to be a gang, because they have someone that says, I love you, I will die for you, you will die for me, we will stick with each other regardless of what happens. And then there is a macho thing there. So we have allowed a subculture to develop because of the hypocrisy at the top of our system. Now when you look at all the scandals, the SNL scandal, the Clarence Thomas situation, the homosexuality within government, there's so many of them. Mm-hmm. And then you go out and you tell these kids to use these people as role models. And these kids know that they're not role models. So we have to get back down to certain basic family values and truth, and let truth be the thing that we all abide by.
You talked about role models, and I know a lot of people have looked at you as a role model for many years through your professional football career.
Well, they were mistaken, but go ahead.
Well, what do you think about that? I mean, for a long time, Jim, you were known as the last angry man.
Well, yes, I'm still angry, and if they listen to what I'm saying now, they're going to think I'm angry. I think role model is a cheap way of using a cliche to do nothing. Mm-hmm. I think it has no value whatsoever, because I think God can only be the role model, because man is not perfect. So who can stand up as a role model without being qualified? Once you have to qualify an individual, then they cannot be a role model. Magic Johnson cannot be a role model. He can be a goal model, because, and I mean G-O-A-L, not mm-hmm. G-O-L-D.
Right.
So Magic is a great basketball player with great work habits. Every year he develops something new. But if you deal with his life outside of basketball, you then have to become a hypocrite in trying to make it seem as if he is a wonderful person. He's not a wonderful person in that particular area. He's a womanizer. Mm-hmm. He has been openly...
promiscuous.
Yeah, promiscuous. That's the word I'm looking for.
Right.
So now, when you say role model and a kid looks at that, Martin Luther King. He says, well, yeah, Dad, that's good, but what about this? Well, forget about that part of it. Just think about this part of it. So I don't like the word at all. I think it's a cheap way of doing nothing. I wish they would ban it and get down to a kind of a curriculum where you teach a person to take responsibility for their own actions. Whereas parents, you can say, look at the good side of this, look at the bad side of it. This man does this well, he does this bad. But we want you to learn how not to do anything bad. And you're responsible for that. Nobody's responsible. Don't ever feel that just because this guy did it, you have to do it. So it would be the opposite of using role models, like use them as an example of good and bad, and then put the responsibility on that person. Then that person have no excuses to ever say, well, my hero went bad.
Right.
You know, it's real simple.
Jim, that kind of goes against what a lot of political leaders these days say. They say that that society is part of the problem, that society should take the responsibility for those who are underprivileged, that society has created this this situation where people, either minorities or people who are underprivileged, haven't had the opportunity to do so, and that society should take care of them. But actually in the Amer-I-Can program, you're telling individuals that it's their responsibility for themselves.
Oh, absolutely. It starts with you. You can never depend on government, society, or anyone else to take care of you. You must develop the habits within your life. You must understand how to manage your life properly. Because if you learn the goal-setting process, even if you only make $5 an hour and know how to apply it, you can then develop and make $9 an hour. So there will never be a point in history where government or society will be able to take care of all the people, because a society must be productive. People must become educated. People must produce. People must work. They must serve the society, and they can get paid for it. But, you know, a lot of people say, you know, welfare is good. You know, they say that the government should do certain things. I don't believe in that at all. And I know that people need a helping hand to do something for themselves, not just a helping hand.
Right.
You see, it's a difference.
There's no question in your mind that people should be responsible for their own actions, that they can't turn and say and make an excuse, as you said, well, my hero turned bad, and that's where I got my example from.
No, I tell the guys in my organization, the so-called gangsters and their bravado, I say that you are cowards. Society don't make you shoot a person, you know, make you commit these acts that are horrible acts. You got paranoia, you're a coward, and I don't respect that part of you. I like the fact that you have changed your life, but never try to justify that kind of an action. You just can't justify it.
Jim, something you said earlier I thought was interesting. I have an opportunity, as you do, to speak to groups occasionally, and I was speaking to a high school banquet one night, and I was talking to the guys about graduating from high school and then going on and trying to do something with their lives afterwards. And about 4 or 5 of them jumped up and said, I'm not going to have to worry about that. I'm the next Deion Sanders.
Oh, boy.
And I said, well, okay. I said, how many of you guys can run a 4.3? And they all stood there like Deion. I said, how many of you guys are going to graduate from high school on time? And a couple of them sat down. And then I said, okay, now those of you who are left, how many of you play 2 sports? And one guy sat down, and the other guy stood there. And I said, so you run a 4.3, you start in 2 sports, and you're going to graduate from high school. He said, in fact, Mr. Kouvaris, which I like that, he called me Mr. Kouvaris. He said, not only that, but I'm going to graduate with honors. And I said, well, now you are somebody who is doing the things that is necessary to get to the next step. Now, you did that. I mean, you got out of high school, you went to Syracuse, played football. What role did your education and your collegiate background, your professional sports background, play in getting you to understand these things, that you got to make certain sacrifices to get to certain points in your life?
Oh, the sacrifices are unbelievable. The sacrifices that I make to be the president of the Amer-I-Can program, unbelievable. The time that I practice high jumping in my backyard, running hills, running sprints, reading, thinking, going to bed on time, learning from other players, going to class, you know, becoming a very good student in philosophy, logic, ethics, all sacrifice. But what I tell people now is that it isn't really sacrifice, because how can you ever do too much for yourself? And knowledge and wisdom and education is like having a weapon. It's like having a razor when you have a mind that's sharp. The world is run by sharp minds, not big, strong bodies.
Isn't that the truth?
So it's like the privilege to have the ability to learn. That's the way I look at it. So I don't even think of it as sacrifice. When I get on a plane and go back east for one night and come back here, and I see my young men training individuals in the city, and they're doing a good job. When I fly to Cleveland, maybe I can motivate the Browns or talk to one of the players. It doesn't matter how tired I am. I like to do it. You know, it adds to everything about me. It's what you call living. We should be living, and we should deal with quality of life. Quality of life is a combination of things. You can have great quality of life on low income. If you have a lovely family, you have a beautiful wife, you have friends, you might only have one television, you know what I mean? You might only go to movies once a month. But if you have a loving family, you're independent, you're free, that's quality of life. We have to stress that other than Deion Sanders got 45 million or 85 million, you know, because all of a sudden money is supposed to be the answer to everything. But knowledge is, it's a privilege to learn.
There's an awful lot of people who talk an awful lot about the money that professional athletes make these days. But you've said before that you feel like that majority of professional athletes could use the Amer-I-Can program themselves.
Oh, most of them. I had a chance to talk to some wives of some of the professional players. And it was unbelievable because in our training, I took them through a feeling session where they could talk about their fathers and their childhood conditions. About 4 or 5 of them broke down in tears. And their husbands were making millions of dollars. And then they talked about the insomnia that their husbands went through and how their husbands were not being treated as human beings, as pro players. So here are these people that are living, you know, at the top with all of the money and all of the trappings, but inside they're very unhappy because of the human things are not being applied properly.
And that's something that the Amer-I-Can program can do for everybody?
Oh, yes. It's a curriculum that transcends race or religion, gender, social economic status, all of that. It's life skills. All human beings need primary, secondary, and social. And when you understand that we all have the same needs, then we can address the human needs and not the Afrocentric or the Jewish or the Anglo-Saxon. It's the human needs that develop a healthy life. And that's what we concentrate on. We do not discriminate. We do not get into the political arena. We do not get into the religious arena because religion wants you to be a part of that church. The politician wants you to be a part of that particular agenda. They're all agendas. Our agenda is that you come to yourself as a human being and live a better life.
And if somebody in Jacksonville wanted to get involved in the Amer-I-Can program, they go to 15th and Myrtle? They're on the corner?
15th and Myrtle, Operation Street. Funny-looking building in a terrible neighborhood that's been resurrected because now it's a very peaceful neighborhood. You'll find some people there that have been highly trained in the organization on how to teach the curriculum. They're in touch with everything that's on the street. Most of them have changed their lives around, and it's a tremendous example of how to reach those who nobody else reach. And I would say to all of the people out there, you know, go by and support Operation Street because the Amer-I-Can program will support them as long as we live and as long as I live.
You know, a lot of people will say, well, I'll go by there and, you know, they really don't know what it's like. But that's not true, right?
Well, explain that to me.
Well, you know, they don't know what it's like to be out here on the street. They don't know what it's like to be in this violent world. But actually, you have people who have turned their lives around themselves.
Oh, yes. Well, you see, in our society, the disenfranchised are so far removed from the affluent, and there's a big gap there, and there's nothing there. There's no way to bridge it. We hope to bridge it, you see. And these people here have good intentions. I mean, the people at PAL, they do wonderful work. I guess Otis Smith does wonderful work.
Does a good job here in town.
The United Way obviously does great things, the Boy Scouts, the Red Cross. But they don't touch the people we're talking about. And these individuals make up the predators. They're the ones that are committing most of the crime because they have nothing. Sometimes no food, sometimes no place to stay. Big-time gangster, big-time gang leader, no food. This whole romanticizing of this thing, it's like there's all this drug money out. That's not true. Only a few people out there make big money from drugs. Most of them are trying to make ends meet. And with a chance to interface properly into the mainstream of American life, they will become good citizens. But you have to be realistic and understand all of the things that it takes to make them, to bring them into the system, because a lot of it is just identification, to get a piece of identification. A lot of them have tickets that's maybe $40,000 worth of tickets. They have to go back to jail to serve it off because it's too much money. They're willing to do all those things. But you don't hear about this, right? Mm-hmm. How difficult it is just for them to have an identification or to pay off their tickets. So you have to go through this whole process with them to give them a chance to become a functioning citizen.
Jim, you've done an awful lot of different things in your life. You are now re-involved with the Cleveland Browns as a special assistant to Art Modell, the owner of the club. What do you tell the professional athletes these days about the kind of privilege that they have, and I know you don't like the word, but the kind of models that they are for young people today? Can you get through to them that they have an awful lot of influence on young people?
Well, I don't really approach them that way. I approach them as their needs come up. Mm-hmm. And I let them approach me about the things that I do. Tommy Vardell has one of our tapes because his father's an FBI man and he's interested in doing some work. The wives of the Cleveland Browns are interested in doing some work. There are kids that have contract problems that I will work with. There are kids that I try to motivate. And it's a period of short-term and long-term goals. My long-term goals are to engage all of the athletes and entertainers in helping the grassroots people. But I want to do it in a respectful way. I don't want to solicit or to bug them, but I want them to realize that most of the work is being done by people who don't have nearly what they have. And the results are phenomenal. And as they see the results, they're going to want to participate, and that's the way that I approach it.
You know, Jim, you talked earlier a little bit about that Amer-I-Can doesn't concentrate on Afrocentric skills or Jewish or Catholic or anything in particular. These days in our society, things are changing a little bit, and many people in the black community are pulling away from the idea of integration, of putting people together, as opposed, excuse me, to having what, at least when I was growing up, there was a lot of talk about everybody together, everybody equal. Now,
superficially together, but go ahead.
Okay, and I agree, I agree. But it had an effect on me as a young man, that I accepted everybody, and I think actually I got this from my parents and from the lifestyle that we had, that we accepted everybody.
And that's very wonderful for you, more so than those who you accept.
Okay, so where do we go? But what's the next step?
Well, let me
tell me what you
don't
think.
ask me too many questions.
Right,
It'll get mixed up. Let me stay with the point. You see, integration is a false concept. Because if you go to Appalachia and you have white people there, but they're poor and they have a lifestyle, and you have a rich lifestyle in Beverly Hills, how do you integrate those lifestyles?
Whether they're both white people or not.
Yeah, they're both white, but
right.
One group is rich and highly educated, the other group is poor and maybe not so educated. So how do you integrate that?
Right.
So you're talking about so many different things. You're talking about gender, you're talking about race, you're talking about economics, you're talking about all of those things. What we have to realize that in America, as African Americans, if we take care of ourselves, if we use the resources that we have, the educational facilities that we have, if we are in a community that have been cordoned off, if we service that community properly, if we develop small businesses, patronize those businesses, reinvest in our community, reinvest in our schools, then we can deal with anyone. It's a matter of choice of both sides. But discrimination and racism has to go. Integration is not getting rid of discrimination and racism. Mm-hmm. So the emphasis should not have been on integrating, because nobody needs to be with nobody don't want to be with them.
Right.
I don't want to be with you, because you're white. Why would I want to be with you because you're white? You know, what's so wonderful about you being white?
Right. You should
but I don't want you
because
you
I'm
and I have something in common.
Right. Exactly.
Now, if you attack discrimination and racism and denying people their rights, we all have to be for that. And just because I have my rights, it doesn't mean I want to integrate your neighborhood, but I want to have the right to buy a house, but I don't have the right not to talk to you. So that's where we got a little mixed up. So the African American has been really our community and our culture have been kind of lost, because we've been pursuing integration, pursuing acceptance, using other people to represent our monies, therefore missing the point of the American free enterprise system. I'll give you an example. In the South, about 30, 40 years ago, you had black businesses. North Carolina Mutual, Atlanta Life, you had black millionaires, you had a black family, you had black communities that were functioning, you could go to movies. You had services of your community because we were forced to work with each other. Then the industrial north, the jobs up here, the factories and so forth, brought us into the mainstream of American life, and then we were like very individualistic, but yet suffering from discrimination. That really threw us for a loop because we've never been able to get back to that kind of family situation, that kind of economic base. And every other cultural group in this country utilize each other to make a way in the free enterprise system. The Jewish community is a perfect example of it, using all the skills in the world to be an affluent group, a powerful group within this country by dealing with each other first. The Koreans would be the latest addition to that. The Koreans have come into black neighborhoods that nobody would put a store in, and have put stores there and businesses, and have worked 24 hours a day to make them go. And then we in the black community said, well, get the Koreans out. Well, if we had the stores, they wouldn't be there. They said, why don't the Koreans hire us? I said, that's ridiculous. We have the ability to have our own stores and hire each other. And then we can hire some Koreans or some white folks, whoever we want to. So we had it backwards. But every other group understood it and have applied the techniques. Once we apply those techniques, that respect, that dignity is there. And then when I am free as I am and you are free as you are, I don't care if you're white, I'm Jim. And you're who you are. And I speak to you as I see fit. I do not beg. I don't ask you for no welfare. I don't ask you for any breaks. I bring something to the table, you bring something to the table, and we deal.
How do we get there next? Through this Amer-I-Can program where you tell people that they have responsibility for their own lives?
Absolutely. There's other programs, there's other concepts that, the same thing. A lot of people that know what we know. But we specifically teach the responsibility of self-determination. You are responsible for your own actions. Attitude change motivation is the greatest form of motivation, the inner desire to do something because it is the right thing to do. That eliminates crutches and crying the blues and worrying about the continuation of welfare. It creates an independence, it creates a responsibility of that independence. And when you take responsibility in America, you can move up the ladder. But if you want to be Michael Jordan and you're talking about these gold models and all of that, and you don't have that talent and you're under an illusion, that's one of the things that I don't like about our system, because we use these role models and have people down here trying to become Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson at the top of the ladder. Well, there's great quality life in getting your education, developing a family, getting a job. There's nothing wrong with the common man. And we have to start emphasizing that the common man in America is what America's all about. It's not about these pseudo-heroes. It's not about Jim Brown. I was just a gladiator, running down the field, knocking over people, physicality. And the boss was looking at me, that's my man, run, that's Jim, run. Well, I didn't take any great pride in that. I wanted to be the person that I am today, to be able to sit here with you and to say, yeah, I played, I loved it, but I've done many, many other things. I've been in business, I've been in movies. I have applied myself as a normal human being.
That's where so many people, I get in the television business, we call it narrow casting, that they see a very tunnel vision of what their future should be. You talk about reading. I know that when I'm on airplanes, I spend my time reading, and I don't sit around and read Sports Illustrated all day long either.
Oh, yes.
And I think that that's an important thing for people to realize, that there are an awful lot of opportunities for them out there to improve themselves on a very basic basis. I mean, just to pick up a book and read it.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's like to know about Shaka Zulu, the great king of the Zulus and his tactics in war. To understand Dessalines and Christophe and Sojourner Truth. And to know probably the most talented man that ever lived, Paul Robeson. Most people don't know this great man. He was in academia, he was a Rhodes Scholar, he was a football captain, he was an All-American football, he was a singer. He got the highest award from the stage in London. Fantastic man. But most people don't know who he is. And he was a black man. And there's so many things in history that if you know, it makes it brings your self-esteem up. And it gives you a weapon because, see, if I sit here and I say to you, Dr. Shockley said we're genetically inferior. But Dr. Leakey said that we are the original people genetically because we are the possessor of the dominant and recessive genes. Two blacks can make a white, but two whites cannot make a black. And if you deal with the movement of the ice and the Neanderthal man and the European, the involvement of the European, Well, every theory says that the original man comes from Egypt and Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone talks about superiority, and I have the knowledge that comes from their geologists and their geneticists, then how can they fight me? They just have to go back to the books.
Right, because you
and
had
check out Leakey, you
that's
know.
right. You took the time to study that and to understand that.
Absolutely,
Jim,
because it's very important.
You're doing fabulous work here. We appreciate the time you spent in Jacksonville. I think you've made a big difference in our community, and I appreciate spending the time with you.
Thank you very much.
Jim Brown, of course, NFL Hall of Famer, movie star, as well as the man who is trying to make a difference for the youth in America through his Amer-I-Can program. I'm Sam Kouvaris. Thank you for watching Worth Quoting.